Shelley Shanfield, member of the League of Women Voters, Washtenaw County, and welcome to Brews and Views. I'd like to introduce our wonderful tech team this evening, members Nancy Brucken and Alice Ulisny. We'll give people a few minutes to get settled, resolve technical issues, and grab a brew. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan voter education organization encouraging informed, active participation in government. We believe that voting is a fundamental citizen right that must be guaranteed. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take positions on issues we have studied. Our programs will not necessarily represent these positions, but provide forums to increase understanding of public policy issues. Teresa.
Thank you, Shelley. Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Reed. I'm Vice Chair of the Program Committee for the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. Tonight, we are happy to present our third of 3 quarterly programs exploring criminal legal reform and restorative justice in Washtenaw County. Our Lunch and Learn programs, held on the 4th Friday of the month and hosted by Shelley, are also dedicated to criminal legal reform this quarter. The U.S. incarcerates a higher percentage of its citizens than any other country in the world. With 5% of the world's population, we have nearly 25% of the world's prisoners. The U.S. spends tens of billions of our tax dollars annually to keep more than 2 million men and women in prison, a vast increase over the last 4 years. Prisoners of the United States are primarily poor and people of color, with policing practices like arbitrary traffic stops, broken window patrolling, and cash bail, imprisoning people for trivial or non-existent offenses and further impoverishing them. Over-incarceration and racial disparities in the criminal legal system plague Washtenaw County just as they do in every other jurisdiction. Our Criminal Justice Collaborative Council, CJCC, works to develop collaborative plans, programs, and positions to reduce systemic stumbling blocks to efficacy and fairness in our criminal legal system. The members of the CJCC include 20 elected and appointed leaders in criminal justice, as well as 4 appointed members from the community. The main focus of the CJCC has been to develop interdisciplinary strategies to alleviate jail overcrowding and to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners about how to implement and fund those strategies. In this presentation, we'll hear from 3 leaders of the CJCC about its past and future work. And I just want you to know, and all our speakers as well, I have edited the bios so we're not here all night because they're all very accomplished. So I hope you like the way I edited your bios. Delphia T. Simpson is Chief Public Defender of Washtenaw County. Since receiving her law degree from the University of Maryland, Ms. Simpson practiced family law at the Legal Aid Bureau of Maryland and at the Michigan Poverty Law Program. She's worked with the ACLU of Michigan as its racial justice staff attorney, focusing on racial profiling, and serving as co-counsel of the East Point, Michigan bicycling while black case. Ms. Simpson joined the Office of Washtenaw County Public Defender in 2003 and became the county's Chief Public Defender in 2017. The Vanzetti Hamilton Bar Association awarded Ms. Simpson the 2015 Frederick Douglass Racial Justice and Harmony Award, and in 2017, she received the Washtenaw County Leadership Award. Sheriff Jerry L. Clayton is serving his 4th term as county sheriff. During his career in the sheriff's office, Sheriff Clayton served as a frontline corrections officer, deputy sheriff, and command officer, as well as corrections commander, police services commander, and SWAT team commander. Sheriff Clayton has been a certified criminal justice trainer and instructor for more than 25 years, providing training and consulting services to private and public sector clients, including the U.S. Department of Justice, the National Sheriff's Association, and the ACLU. Sheriff Clayton serves on the boards of several local social service organizations. In 2017, at the invitation of the UN High Commission on Human Rights, Sheriff Clayton was a U.S. representative and a presenter at an international conference on law enforcement and bias-based policing in Geneva, Switzerland. And Sue Shink is Washtenaw County Commissioner for District 2, and serves as the board liaison to the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Road Commission, the Washtenaw Food Policy Council, the Coalition for the Remediation of Dioxane, the Agricultural Lands Preservation Advisory Committee, and more. During the COVID-19 crisis, Ms. Shink has worked closely with the County Health Department to ensure the safety of our residents and businesses. Through the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center, Ms. Shink volunteers as an attorney to help people who have been abused by their spouses and immigrants ready to become citizens. Ms. Shink is a graduate of the UM's School of Law and earned a master's degree in resource policy from Michigan's formerly named School of Natural Resources and Environment. Finally, Sheriff Clayton, Delphia, and Sue, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for spending time with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So glad you could be here. So Sheriff Clayton is the chair of the CJCC, so we thought that maybe he should go first.
Well, thank you very much. First, thanks for having us and joining us this evening. So what I'd like to do is just provide some context and sort of lay out the architecture of CJCC, then give a little historical perspective, talk a little bit about the current framework, and then I will pass it to my colleagues. So the Criminal Justice Collaborative Committee is a term that's been forwarded by the U.S. Department of Justice, National Institute of Corrections, that really applies in a number of different ways. It can be an informal or formal committee that really provides a forum for really a large number of what's considered key justice system agency officials and other officials in general government to really come together and discuss the justice system issues and practices. So that's really the concept, bringing all those folks together and really acknowledging a couple of things. The inherent tension that sits in the criminal justice system, it's designed that way. And then how do we put right policies in place to address the tension and get the kind of outcomes that we want? CJCC should be focused on a couple of things: planning, analysis, and coordination. So really, when we think about planning, we're really talking about a future-oriented, somewhat optimistic approach to how we're going to move an organization or move a system. You know, planning involves defining what the problem is, making sure that you clarify the objectives, establishing priorities, and then instituting programs, and then evaluating the impact of those programs. That's what the CJCC should be focused on. How do we plan in a way that positions the criminal justice system to be the most effective and to get the right kind of outcomes for all the people of Washtenaw County, not just a select few? The tension comes because the system in and of itself is designed in a way that's had disparate impact on particular groups. So they have to acknowledge that and put plans in place to mitigate that disparate impact. The analysis piece really requires you to collect and analyze data. And we know that the criminal justice system is established and set in silos. And the only way to really be effective is to find a way to collect data in the right way, to integrate those data, to answer the kind of questions that we want to answer, to determine two things: how effective is the system? Is it delivering the outcomes that we want? And the outcomes that we want are, you know, equitable outcomes for everyone involved, not just the people that are traversing the system, but for those victims of crimes as well. And the last part is coordination. You know, how do we coordinate all these different groups? And by the way, many of these groups are led by people that are independently elected or appointed. So that also adds to the tension. How do you get all those folks in the room? There are three levels that you coordinate on: the agency level. So each independent agency should think about their place in that and their role in the system. The city-county level. So you bring in city and county folks together, leaders together around the criminal justice system. And the last one is what we call this comprehensive interagency and intergovernmental level. So that's when you're looking at the entire system, this entire siloed, separate system led by independently elected and appointed folks with different philosophies, different values, different points of view. How do you bring all that together to create the system that gets us the outcomes that we want? So there's some benefits associated with planning and coordinating in the context of a criminal justice collaborative, criminal justice collaborative committee. You should get improved analysis of problems. So as opposed to one group going out and saying, well, this is a problem and I'm going to solve it, doing it in a collaborative way. How do we collect those data, analyze those data, identify root causes to problems, and then have a kind of solution that gets us the outcomes that we want. Another benefit is improved communication, cooperation, coordination. You get all those people in the room in a safe space where you can start having the kind of communication you need to develop the plans that you're looking for. This committee should also result in very clear goals and objectives around the system, more effective allocation of resources. For example, if the court has a schedule that's impacting some of the other players in the system, to be able to sit down and talk about that schedule and design it in a way where it doesn't inefficiently tap into the resources of the other players in the system. You should have improved programs and services. So if we identified outcomes and then we put the right systems in place and the right programs, and when we talk about improved programs and services, what we really mean by that is the kind of services that are the right services for the right people at the right time. And we make sure that we're covering the gaps that currently exist in the system and we're eliminating the duplication in the system. Those should be some of the outcomes that you get from a CJCC. Let me just, so that's the CJCC in a broad sense. Let's talk about this CJCC. So this reiteration of the CJCC came about conversations I know I was having with the county administrator, and I'm sure he had the conversations with the chair of the board, because it is a county commission appointed committee, right? We knew that there were a lot of reforms coming down the pike. I know from the sheriff's office perspective with law enforcement assisted diversion, alternative responses, we didn't want to do any of that in a vacuum. And we knew whatever we're doing around reform, it needs to be done with everybody sitting at the table having conversations. I will just say this, there's always a problem when one actor in the system is unilaterally going out on their own, trying to change the system by themselves without really understanding the unintended impact and consequences of those changes. A CJCC, bringing everybody to the table, actually starts to prevent that from happening. So this version of the CJCC is important because it really is the most comprehensive gathering of criminal justice, legal system, community-based stakeholders in the county, bringing all those people together under one umbrella with a very central focus. I want to just share with you how we started our meeting and sort of lay out what we really were looking for in the CJCC. That we understood that this group is uniquely positioned to provide really an opportunity for thoughtful and deliberate strategic planning around the Washtenaw County criminal justice, criminal legal system. It is really an opportunity to do it the right way. A lot of us have good intent, but if you don't execute it in the most deliberate and thoughtful way, in a strategic way, anticipating unintended consequences, that good intent oftentimes turns into bad outcomes. And oftentimes those outcomes are bad for the people that people say that they're trying to defend. So I think it's really important that we keep that in mind. And I'll end by just giving a little bit of a historical perspective of the CJCC. So in Washtenaw County, the CJCC evolved really from the jail overcrowding task force that was created back in the early 2000s by the Chief Circuit Court Judge Archie Brown. And it was really in response to chronic jail overcrowding. Sheriff doing his own thing, the courts doing their own thing, chronic jail overcrowding that really impacted from a budget standpoint. The sheriff at the time then reached out to the National Institute of Corrections and asked them to come out and visit Washtenaw County to help examine the criminal justice system. One of the recommendations from that visit from the National Institute of Corrections was for Washtenaw County to really establish a permanent CJCC. And it really was intended to improve the interagency communication, cooperation and coordination, all the things that we talked about. That we should be establishing clear goals, objectives, and priorities for the criminal justice system, and to more effectively allocate resources. In 2004, the bylaws were put in place. And those in 2011, everything was updated. I think we sunsetted the CJCC, I think in 2012. And really it was because at the time there were no overriding factors. We were meeting, but we didn't see a lot of traction in those meetings. So as opposed to just meeting to meet, the decision was made to set the CJCC aside with the anticipation that we would bring it back when we were better prepared to actually take advantage of bringing all of those actors together. And quite frankly, that's where we're at now. We wanted to bring the CJCC back for a couple of reasons. A lot around equity and policy practice and operational protocol. And as we think about the right kinds of reforms, what should those reforms be? What outcomes should we be targeting? How should we collect and analyze data to determine whether we're getting those outcomes? And then how do we have a forum where we make adjustments within the system with the different players to make sure that we're hitting those outcomes? The last thing I'll leave you with are the committees, then I'll pause right there because there might be an opportunity to come back and talk about the committees. So let me pause right there and turn it over to our chair of the Board of Commissioners, Commissioner Shink.
Thank you, Sheriff Clayton. So I knew that you would give an excellent introduction. And so I feel like if I didn't say anything, people would still have a pretty good grasp of, or an excellent grasp of what we're trying to do here. So when we started talking about bringing back the CJCC, it came out of an important priority of the Board of Commissioners to eliminate racial bias or systemic bias of any kind in the way that we provide county services. And so we need to make sure that we do that because systemic bias keeps people from really living their best life in so many ways. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification of how that works, but it's just barriers that people don't need in their life. And so since the CJCC had already operated and had operated successfully, it made a lot of sense. It's one of those things, and Sheriff Clayton touched on it, there's a tremendous amount of tension built into county government. So every independently elected official has their own budget and their own office, and they make their own decisions. And yet the board has something to say about those because we have the budgeting authority and responsibility. So I think the system is set up to encourage us to work together, to try to reach out across our silos and to make sure that we have these conversations. And the CJCC is a tool for doing that. One of the things that I think the board brings to that in our participation, I'm active in my role as chair of the Board of Commissioners. I believe Jason Morgan is also a liaison, and then Justin Hodge is participating in the CJCC as a member of the Community Action Board around law enforcement. I may have garbled that name. So CABLE is what everybody calls it. And so we have quite a bit of board representation there. And then also our administrator, Greg Dill, is active. And so we don't directly provide criminal justice services, but what we do is we work with all of the different actors within the system. And so we can keep that broader view. We can help keep the process moving. If some of the actors have something that they're working on or concerned on, we're going to know something about it. And so it's been really exciting to be able to be a part of this and to work toward reducing, I think our focus at the board had been around reducing systemic bias, but there are a lot of other things like how do we make it easier for people who are working or who are involved in the criminal justice system to work with the different players? How do we support the courts in the treatment courts? How do we support the prosecutor or the public defender in the work that they're doing? So all those conversations can be had and can be had more easily and keep the broader view. And so I also want to talk a little bit, and I don't want to confuse things. This is a completely separate process, but really does include many of the other people who are involved in the CJCC, which is an outgrowth of the crew report, which was a report that had been created by independent citizens, residents, all involved in the legal system. So including Alma Willer-Smith, Linda Rexler, and Marianne Sarosi. And there was some support for the ACLU. After that report came out showing that there might be systemic bias in the criminal justice system, and particularly in the courts, Crew applied for a grant through, I believe it was the Michigan Justice Fund. And so we have a $2,000 grant as a community to form a citizens committee on racial equity in the criminal justice system. And we're calling it the Washtenaw Equity Project. And so our public defender, Delphia Simpson, and Sheriff Jerry Clayton are involved in that, along with really pretty much all the institutional actors from the CJCC. Some of the citizen participants are going to be different. So we've been developing a broad work group and subcommittees from pastors and educators and people who have been in the criminal justice system. So the formerly incarcerated, we're seeing if it's possible to bring in people who are incarcerated now, although I think that that's maybe a challenge that we're not going to be able to overcome. And educators, because we know that some of these problems start back in the school. And so we are trying to have a broad community conversation around criminal justice and really try to get to some of the issues that come up that our institutional actors may be unaware of, or maybe not quite as aware of as we need to be, to try to resolve some of the problems, and really also look at root causes, what things happen in succession to drive somebody toward the criminal justice system. Where can we try to make changes as a community, because this isn't all going to be government, to try to change the trajectories of people's lives. And then if they do enter the criminal justice system, how can we make that process not only more efficient, but also more constructive for the people who are involved? And I think, it's way past time that we do that. I know that many people have been trying to make changes throughout our history here in Washtenaw County. I think now is a really special time. I think there's a lot of motivation. There's a lot of community support, and all of the different actors in the criminal justice system are sitting down at the table quite often to try to figure out, how can we do this better? How can we serve our community better? So I have more to say, but I think I'll leave it at that for the moment, and then have some for later. So I'll pass it on to our public defender, Delphia Simpson.
So good evening, everyone. So I kind of have a unique perspective, because I was in a lesser role, sat at the table of the first CCC, CJCC board committee. Then I have been present to see during the time period between the two, between the first CCCJ committee and the second CJCC committee, and what happened with the system, and also participate in the Washtenaw Equity Partners. So I really do bring kind of a unique perspective. I must say that, both of these organizations work, work is very important in order to continue the conversation that we want about the system and create the criminal justice system that we want, as well as identifying and getting community input and seeing where throughout kind of our society where there's disparities that lead people to, find themselves involved in the criminal legal system. So I must say, and I want to start out with saying, in Washtenaw County, we are very lucky, right? For many reasons. I, as the public defender, sit on and interact with many public defenders throughout the state. And what's happening here in Washtenaw County is not happening anywhere else. Long before, in particular for public defenders, being able to sit at the table with other criminal justice partners, and then also being part of a group that with community groups and people who community groups that are interested in the criminal justice system and being a part of that does not happen very often. And so we're very lucky to have this kind of momentum in Washtenaw County. I can say the group, the CJCC, before really allowed and the partners, the systemic partners, to sit down and, like, as Sheriff Clayton said, sit down and talk about issues that impacted the system. And there was real progress that was made through those very productive conversations. And then when CJCC was sunsetted, those conversations didn't stop, right? There were, times where many of the players, when they were making decisions, would call each other and have conversations with each other and talk about each other. And then now with this, as Commissioner Shink just stated, with this new renewed kind of awakening of the how damaging if the criminal justice system can be if it's not, if we don't correct it, how damaging it can be to individuals. There still are conversations that are going on. And the fact that we are able to all sit together and have this conversation and have the intent to move forward, we are very fortunate. So I really am looking forward to working with both of these groups in order to see in particular how this, what recommendations and what efforts can be made to help the clients that we represent who are indigent or partially indigent who find themselves in the criminal justice system.
Thanks, Delphia. If I can talk a little bit about, the duties and responsibilities of the council, that's as laid out in the bylaws that are approved by the board, and then talk a little bit about the committees. The real work is done in the committees. The larger CJCC, to try to manage that, to actually get a lot done, would be too unwieldy. I'll just say I don't have the skills as the chair to try to do that. So we break it down. The work is done in the subcommittees. But let me just talk about the responsibilities. And I think there needs to be some clarity. So the CJCC is just a body that forwards recommendations. They don't set policy. They don't make decisions around contracts. They don't make budgetary decisions. They make recommendations to the board, and really it's designed to facilitate communication amongst the members of the system to enhance the efficacy of the system. So here are the specific duties and responsibility. Encourage local planning activities in order to promote greater interagency cooperation, efficiency, effectiveness, and innovation. Provide overall direction and determine priorities for the larger staff. The committee can recommend initiation or approval of any study, policy discussion, program, those type of things for the larger council to bring forward. Provide review and comment on criminal justice plans, programs, priorities, and projects. For example, there's a lot of discussion around alternative responders. And there's some work being done to develop some models for alternative responders. My excitement around the CJCC is that's the body that you bring that to really talk about and analyze that model and to see the impact. Because despite the best efforts of the people designing those programs, there are unintended consequences that really come as a result of the values of the people that are designing that. And in those values are inherent blind spots that they cannot see that others may be able to see. So you'll get well, what about this? And did you think about that? And I'm going to continue to repeat this because I've seen it happen too many times. The blind spots usually land on the problems that come with those blind spots, usually land on the people that we say we're trying to help. Usually people of color that don't have the voice to respond to it. So I think it's really important that we just don't go off working on our own, that we bring it back to a body like this. Recommend to the county board that contracts be entered into for services. So again, recommend, apply for grants that have interagency or cooperative partnerships with council member agencies, organizations. So, you know, the sheriff's office may be looking for something, and they may, the committee, the council can get together and maybe facilitate a connection between the sheriff's office and the public defender, or the sheriff's office and the prosecutor's office to pursue a particular grant. So that's really the role and responsibilities of the committee and of the council. And the last thing I'll say is I'll give you the subcommittees. So the chair has the authority to appoint appoint committees, both standing committees and special committees as is deemed necessary. The way we share our responsibilities is both the chair and the vice chair. Delphia has done more work than I have on this stuff. And so I'll give you the subcommittee. So the Information Sharing and Integration Committee. So that is the committee that ultimately we hope that will produce monthly reports that talk about the trends in the criminal justice system, ways to integrate data and answer some of our questions around impact of policies and practices. This might be an opportunity for that subcommittee to work with WEP once they get rolling on the work that they're doing. They're trying to integrate and analyze data. And I see the WEP as the group that can help inform the CJCC around some of the recommendations that they forward moving to the board and other actors in the system. The other subcommittee is the Mental Health Diversion Subcommittee. Lots of work has already been done around mental health diversion, and there's already a Washtenaw County Diversion Council. So what we offered to do is to take that council and sort of integrate, and that's the subcommittee that is informing the CJCC around mental health diversion. Really quick, the Racial Equity Committee. And that committee speaks to what Commissioner Shink was talking about in terms to addressing bias in the system and to minimize, if not eliminate, the disparate impact of policy practices and operational protocols from the different entities within the system. So that group is develop and propose the development, alignment, and integration of a variety of new and existing policies, procedures, initiatives that we hope results in this coherent plan focused on just and equitable criminal justice legal system. So this is not something that we're going to get because we wish it. It's something we'll get because we're really planful and really work towards it. And we hope that a lot of that work comes out of the Racial Equity Committee. And the last committee has the longest name because it connects to so many things. The Deflection, Diversion, Reentry, and Alternative Conditions Committee. So that group is really designed, support community-based diversion deflection programs, promote system-wide collaborative effort between people with lived experience, that sit in that space, the police, prosecutors, civil rights advocates, public defender, political leaders, behavioral health providers, all of that designed to reduce unnecessary justice system involvement for folks that have had lived experience with inside the system, especially for people that are suspected of low-level offenses, pose no public safety threat, developing systems to deflect them from the system, the reduction of racial disparities in enforcement efforts, and to utilize harm reduction oriented processes for responding to low-level offenses like drug sales, drug possession sales, prostitution, things of that nature. The last two things that I'll end. Increase the number of pretrial individuals utilizing alternatives to incarceration, and increase the number of individuals exhibiting that exhibit behavioral health disorders who are evaluated and connected to services outside of the system. That's where the deflection comes in. Once that person enters that system, then that's a small societal failure. If we can deflect them and keep them out of the system, that's a success from our part. Look, if we can get them before they end a crisis because we have the right systems, that's the success. So those are the standing committees. The co-chairs have been identified. We've had our first co-chair meeting. So we expect that the momentum will start to pick up now because it will be turned over to the co-chairs to really move the efforts of the CJCC.
Thank you. So those, quickly, just a question, those, so the subcommittees are pretty new?
Yes, so the
Okay.
subcommittees, yes, they're new co-chairs just elected, and we had our first meeting.
Okay, that's really great. I want to say just register before I get to people's questions, a couple of impressions. And one is I feel a little naive about what I'm learning about the complexity of the criminal justice and criminal legal system, just at the county level, right? I mean, we're one of 83 counties in Michigan, and the complexity here is really staggering. So I want to mention that, and also then just gratitude for all of your work in this system, and for Delphia. I was wondering, one of the questions I had was like, do all counties do this? And you answered that all counties do not do this. So I am very grateful that we have the personnel and the citizens in this county who are able to make this happen. So we have several questions, and I think I'll just throw them out to you, and you can, it can be a jump ball for every question, however you want to go at it. Seem okay? I'm hearing nodding heads. So
I was just thinking about how the sheriff is taller than either Delphia or me.
okay. Well, maybe we'll see how he handles that, or how the two of you can team up. So first of all, I think this is a great question. How can places of worship be involved in community corrections?
I will just start by saying that in terms of, I'm not going to speak to the specifics about how they're involved in community corrections, but I am going to talk in specifics about how they're engaged in these processes. I believe that there are pastors involved in, or religious leaders involved in both the CJCC and in the Washtenaw Equity Project, because we know that they do have a very close relationship with many of the people in this county, as well as being, very engaged in trying to make the world a better place. And so they are engaged in the process. And then I would say in a lot of ways, before people ever get to the criminal justice system, we have quite a few churches and religious organizations involved in working to address root causes, working to address poverty, literacy, after school support for kids, families, trying to make sure that people have what they need so that they're less likely to become involved in criminal activity. And I think at that point, I will stop speaking and turn it over to my colleagues to speak as to how they may be more specifically involved in the criminal justice system itself.
Well, I think for a lot of folks, especially people that we represent, and I can say that one of our efforts in our office is to make sure that clients that we represent get the same consideration that people who have means do. And one of those ways is making sure once they're arraigned and prior to pre-trial, that they get into therapy. They get, if it's an issue with their child, they get, parental counseling. They get, mental health issue. They get, resources and services that that somebody of means would find easy to be able to access. And I think kind of the religious community, if they have those resources, if they're able to provide those resources or to someone, that they let that be known, and that right now we have a social worker that's on staff, and we're expanding that unit, that social worker then could possibly connect one of our clients to those resources. So for me, that's a real concrete way that the faith community could get involved.
It seems to me for the faith communities and nonprofit social service organizations.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, are doing that work at the root cause level. That one of you mentioned, I can't remember who did. Before the next question, I just want to say hi to Belinda Doolin. All of our panelists know who Belinda Doolin is, and people who were with us last month also know Belinda is the executive director of the Dispute Resolution Center, a key player in restorative justice efforts in Washtenaw County. So welcome, Belinda, and feel free to jump in. I'm sure that our panelists would be happy to have your voice as well, and if you want to respond to any of these questions, or just add any thoughts. Another question that came in advance. Hi, good to see you. Welcome.
I'm a little bit on the spot, but no, I'm here to listen and learn, but thank you for acknowledging me.
Well, just whenever you think I should say something, do, okay? You have unusual expertise. So here's a question that also came in early. How do we make criminal justice reforms durable? The pendulum shows no signs of coming to rest on the side of equity and equality. That to me speaks to, I think, I reading between the lines and what you said, some of you said, all of you said, really, was that it's hard to make these relationships work. And making the CJCC work really is relationship based. And that's what also makes it fragile. So this question is very to the point. Like, how do we institutionalize these reforms?
Well, I'll start by saying, to Delphia's point, as Washtenaw County is like other counties, not perfect, but it's better, I think, positioned with people in various leadership positions that, at least right now, have a shared sense of values and a shared sense of the kind of outcomes that we want. So I don't know how long that window will stay open. So it is incumbent upon us to move with what I will say deliberate haste. So folks want to get everything fixed by tomorrow. Those solutions, I think, I'm going to continue to say, are harmful. So deliberate haste for me is think about the outcomes that you want, develop the strategies that you want to put in place, because I want to circle back to this in a minute, because there's a question that came up around how do you measure success, but put the strategies in place and then structurally invest in those strategies. So no one-time dollars, no grant dollars, structural dollars. So you have to plan for the long term. And folks that think we're going to put these policies and practices into place and in a blink of an eye, we're going to erase all the disparities, haven't been following American history for the last 400 years. So let's acknowledge the fact that we are here because of the systemic practices that are woven into the fabric of this country. Now, people might not want to hear that, but that is the reality. So for us to move to the way we want to do it, let's do it in a thoughtful and deliberate and a measured way. It takes a little more time. But that's the way you do it, because if not, we're going to make some mistakes that the people that don't want this to happen will say, see, that's why you shouldn't do it. And we're seeing it all over the country as we see crime rise and people point to progressive practices for why the crime's rising. Now, in many situations, that's not the case. But because some of those things weren't put in a way where you can point to and say, I'm measuring it, then it gives people the space to make that argument. So I think we make it sustainable by being deliberate, making it structural, making it part of policy and operational protocol. So when the leadership changes, those practices can continue.
Another thing I heard is that you have staff positions devoted to this work, budget lines devoted to the work, and importantly, what I heard from you is also data.
So one of the things, what I was thinking is, and I had seen a question in the chat, how do you define success? And I think we have different ideas of success depending on where we sit, right? But by coming together, we can define success together. And I don't think that we have done that. We haven't done that yet. And we haven't done that with the Washtenaw Equity Project yet. But we define success. We're informed by data and metrics. We continue to collect data and metrics and to make sure that they are answering, are we succeeding? And I think setting up those systems is going to help us continue on into the future. And like the sheriff said, when positions change, it's a lot harder to undo things. And one of the things I've learned about county government in the time I've been involved is that it is a lot like a giant ship. And anybody who's involved in county government comes on and helps steer that ship while they're there. But that ship has a lot of momentum to go in the direction it's going. But it also, if somebody wants to come in and undo a bunch of really important, successful programs, that is also going to be very difficult. And I don't know how far we want to get into the talk about structural budgeting, but it's very difficult to find structural dollars for a position or for a program. And it's also very difficult to remove those dollars or to repurpose them. And so those are ways that when we get things going in the direction that we want, we can help them stay that way. There are other ways too. And I know that Sheriff Clayton and probably Delphia has worked on this quite a bit. And working with our legislature and working with our Supreme Court to codify some of those changes. Washtenaw County is a model. And I would just say our public defender is going to be doing a lot of things in the future that I'm really excited about. And I believe that we are a model in so many places. Our sheriff is doing a lot of things that are kind of new, but are functioning as a model for other communities. And so some of these things are going to be left up to different counties to adopt it or not. But some of these things can be codified as expectations for the entire state going forward. And I think that because we have very engaged legislators, we are in a pretty good position to have an outsized impact on the rest of our state. And if I could, one more thing, sorry.
No problem.
It's hard sometimes in these things. I forget to recognize just how engaged and thoughtful our county leaders are. And I want to make sure that I make that really clear. I think we can't make any one player in this process come to the table, and yet everybody is there, everybody is engaged, and everybody is working hard to do the right thing as they see it and to serve our residents. And that's really an amazing thing to have happen and an amazing feeling to be a part of that. So sorry that I interrupted you.
That's okay. I just wanted to touch on something, a word that you mentioned is expectation, but from a different angle, not from the legislators, but from the citizens. Like if we start building the expectation of this is what we expect from our system. Right now, I think it's a much lower bar. Like we expect very little from the criminal justice system and how people interact with it. But if we raise that level, that expectation, along with all the other things, but to say in Washtenaw County or anywhere, the expectation is, that when somebody walks into the courthouse, the expectation is that they're going to be treated fairly. If the expectation is that, a person's interaction with law enforcement in Washtenaw County is to be, treated fairly with respect. And if a law enforcement agency deviates from that, there's consequences for that, right? So I really think not only with data, with legislative input, but it is also raising the expectations of citizens as to what they expect the criminal legal system to look like and how one should experience it.
I think that's so important. And I have a couple questions popping in my head. First, I want to say hi to Victoria Burton Harris, who was with us when Belinda Doolin was. Victoria, as most of you know, is chief assistant prosecutor for the county. So welcome. Also indispensable in restorative justice efforts in Washtenaw County. So hi, Victoria, as well. So I was struck by, you guys repeated a few times how problematic it is when disconnected activists, passionate but disconnected activists, want to launch something and aren't well informed, and it ends up hurting the people they're trying to help often. And that seems to me to connect to this issue of sustainability and expectations as a communications issue. And, people need to know, the residents of the county need to know about this work, need to know about the complexity, need to know about the heart that's going into it and the expertise. And so I have a question that's a little bit, a little sideways, and that is to ask how we, everybody on this call, other activist groups can raise awareness of this work, and like what proper paths, what expectations should be, and what constructive paths for activists might be. How can we help with communications?
Anybody? Okay, I guess my mic is off, if I'm not muted, so I guess. So,
Yeah.
I think, for me, and and Teresa, you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about how complex this issue is. And so, it is, people, a lot of people like to say, oh, like, if they just think of this, I can go in there and solve this issue or problem. So it really is a matter of people who want to get involved, to take the time before they make judgments about why people are doing what they're doing, because everybody, especially in the system, has a role, right? And in a county building, and so the lights are
Oh, that's what you said earlier. Yeah.
helping the environment.
You have to keep moving.
And but if they, like, think about, and that's the benefit of, sitting around a table and talking and finding out, like, what each player does, what they bring, where their intentions are, and sitting around a table to talk about it. When Sheriff Clayton was really talking about CJCC, the magic happens in those conversations, where people, and I expect the same thing will happen with WEP. The magic happens when that work group sits down and talks about all the efforts and where they want things to change, and they see where there's limitations and where there's opportunities. And so I think, for somebody who wants to get involved, becoming informed, calling up people before you make a determination, oh, this person is not acting in the best interest, and so forth, call and have a conversation if you can. Join, there'll be plenty of work groups, subcommittees with the Washtenaw Equity Partners. Be active in that, seek that out. The Criminal Justice Collaborative Council, there's all the information of all the members are on there. Call them, contact them, or email them. Don't call, email. And that question or that issue can be presented to the full committee. So that's how I would suggest somebody become involved.
Sue or Jerry, do you have anything to add?
The meetings are the CJCC, yeah, I said it right. Meetings are public, and so there's always some time for public comment. And then there are also other boards and commissions that the Board of Commissioners has created to help us do our work and have public input. And so that's a good place for people to become involved also. And then I think the other thing is that there are elements of what we're working on throughout the community, right? So like, if we know that literacy is a problem that that leads people to become involved in the criminal justice system, and somebody has a passion for working with people who can't read or don't read as well as they need to, then volunteering in that regard. A lot of this work is person to person, right? And so we can bring in money and we can have programs, but I think a lot of this, it's so big and so complex, and there's so much need in our community that even if a person feels like, they're not doing enough by helping in a small space, they really are. And so I don't want to be overly simplistic about that. Everybody's got their strengths, right? Like, is your strength working one-on-one with a person? Is your strength doing research? Figure that out. And I'm sure there's a place for everybody in this. We really, we are at a pivotal time in our history. We need to make this work happen with all deliberate haste. And so we, if somebody wants to be involved, we can find a place for them. But yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot of work to be done. And it is important, I think, also to come at this with a goodwill and not blaming. If we're expecting institutional actors to change their behavior, they have to feel like they're in a relatively safe place to be doing that. I was a clerk to a judge at the circuit court back when I was a young lawyer, and nobody told that judge how to run his courtroom. So this is a change for them, and I think this is a change for a number of the institutional actors, and we need to respect that they're willing to sit down and have people say all the things that people are going to be saying, right? But I'm just saying to the public, people who want to be involved, please be kind, please try to be constructive, and please try to be informed. And I think I can only really speak for myself, but I believe that the majority of us, if not every single person involved, would really relish the opportunity to talk to people about how they might be involved.
I'd like to invite anybody, either one of the tech team or one of the speakers, to put a link to the CJCC website and maybe also the County Commission website in our chat, so we can add it to the show notes so people can access it if they view this later. Also, just say yes, that assumption of goodwill is so important, and it's such a fraught issue, and people have been so badly hurt that can be hard to keep that in mind. But that assumption of goodwill is and we're so fortunate in Washtenaw County that it's well placed. So another question that had.
Teresa, if I may,
Please.
I want to circle back to the how do you measure success, right? And just give, the commissioner talked about it. I want to give a concrete example. So I know in the sheriff's office, we work a lot from what we call ultimate outcomes. So we're a mission, strategy, structure organization. Let's define where we want to go, what our mission is, our ultimate outcome. Then we'll talk about strategy, structure, and then we'll talk about how we finance it. In the public sector, we do this backwards. Everything is driven by budget, right? Everything's driven by budget. Once you drive it by budget, you restrict creativity, blah, 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 blah. I'll leave that, I'll park that. Let me give you a couple of very specific ultimate outcomes that came from our mental health diversion council. Then now remember I said we folded that into a subcommittee. So I'm hoping we'll get some of the same thing from the other subcommittees. So as the mental health diversion, the council, as we collected and analyzed data, and we looked at the data, and as we talked to people with lived experience, we talked to people receiving services, delivering services at a number of different angles, from Delphia's perspective of her clients all the way down the line. Here are some of the ultimate outcomes. So we said, if we did everything right, and we'll figure out what everything is, here are the things that we should see, or we desire to see. Concrete, reduce the number of jail bookings among individuals with behavioral health needs. So we have a baseline, we have a benchmark, we know what those numbers are. So as we implement our strategies, we should see that reduction. Reduce the length of stay in jail among individuals with behavioral health needs. So what we saw was, if you had a behavioral health disorder, your length of stay was longer given a similarly situated than someone without. Increase the number of connections to treatment among individuals with behavioral health needs. Reduce the rate of recidivism among individuals with behavioral health needs that end up in the system. And our overarching goal was to reduce the racial and economic disparities within the jail of incarcerated individuals. So we laid that out, and now we're starting to develop strategies. We've actually hired people and assigned them to provide services for people on probation that were getting violation of probation because for technical violations that we knew were a result of their condition. Mm-hmm. So we'll hire someone and help them navigate that. that's how you start to reduce that number. So that's a concrete example of how a committee can start with ultimate outcomes and be able to measure it with data to demonstrate success. This is what I hope we'll see from the other committees. Imagine as we start to flesh out the racial equity committee and they start to look at those ultimate outcomes and we talk about that, and we start to drive that. That's how you start to see a movement of the needle using empirical data in the most objective way.
And so you started to address a question that my next question was, does the CJCC as a whole have a strategic plan per se? And it sounds like not all the committees do. That was a behavioral health committee, but not all the committees do. Is that part of what you guys want to make happen as the leaders of the CJCC? Okay, I mean, because that feels to me like that also would be key to sustainability.
Yeah, the plan is, like I said, the committees now are starting to be set. The chairs are in place. We're laying an outline for the chairs to operate. One of their first actions is to start that process of identifying, your ultimate outcomes.
Great. That's really exciting.
And they'd have to take those to the larger CJCC to get approval and endorsement.
Mhm.
But once you do that, that really is your North Star.
Right.
So the strategies you put in place, where you start to invest your time and efforts, should all be towards achieving the outcomes that we all agree that we want. There's an opportunity for public input. So that's how you start to connect that to the larger community.
Is the public able to observe or participate in probably not participate, but to observe the committee meetings as well, or just the CJCC as a whole?
I think that we're working that out as a procedural process. And so I can't answer that entirely right now. I think there's some value to both. But we're working, we've asked our lawyer to weigh in and we're trying to figure out what makes the most sense there.
Yeah. I mean, I can see why, I mean, it might be helpful to have people being observing and maybe have a question period, but not to, be full participants, because then it would be mayhem. But well, somebody asked a question, and this was in advance. What was the process for appointing the 4 members from the community, and what are their qualifications, or what are their background? Why them?
Well, we did that. And I am just going to.
We, the county.
Sorry, the Board of Commissioners did that. And so one person has a family member who has been incarcerated, and she's been involved in work around that. And then another person is a member of the faith community and has been involved in works toward restorative justice. And I am blanking on the other 2 members of the community who are involved. I don't have that in front of me tonight. So, but they applied, and we put out a call through our clerk's office, and just the way we would for any other committee. And people applied, and then the chair, Jason Morgan, was the chair for some of the appointments, and I was for others. Looked at the applicants and proposed to the board the name, and then the board could and did approve them. Okay. So they're people who bring a different perspective and some real experience to the table.
Right. Okay. So, but it was an open self-referral process. Mm-hmm. All commissions. Okay, great. That's helpful. Let's see, a few more questions here. Well, this is an interesting one. So what changes, for better or for worse, have you seen in the county? And then the additional question, changes that are either encouraging or devastating.
Well, I guess if I can say, we see that the grants that different actors in the criminal justice system have gone out and gotten. And I think that it's clear, just sort of in the same way that for our climate work, we knew that we needed to have a climate action plan. And so we're working toward that. But in the meantime, we weren't willing to just wait and see. We started to do things to reduce our carbon emissions. I would say on a much broader scale, the actors in the criminal justice system have gone out and gotten a lot of grants, and the state has been pushing money toward innovative and constructive efforts. And so there's a lot happening to make things better, including diversion and deflection. I feel a little reticent to, I'm not operationalizing any of these things. So, but I think that is really exciting to see that there is work being done. And in the meantime, we're working toward a more cohesive plan.
So I'll just add really quick. So we anticipate the pilot rollout of our law enforcement assisted diversion deflection in Ypsilanti Township probably by October. So early fall. That's a collaboration with Sheriff's Office and Public Defender and Prosecutor's Office and Community Mental Health. And it's really, and one of the questions was how are law enforcement officers trained to support deflection, diversion, and equitable treatment. That was built into our ultimate outcomes around LEAD. So we developed the ultimate outcomes. We developed the behavioral requirements for the staff to support those outcomes. And we've identified the training, the knowledge and skills they need to actually do that. So to answer that question, the law enforcement officers will be trained in deflection diversion efforts. What the criteria are, they also receive 2 days, and it will actually, this fall, it'll be 20 hours of mental health crisis training. So they're not going to diagnose people, but they'll be able to recognize people with a behavioral health condition. And that helps them as they analyze and assess people for diversion and deflection. Community mental health has hired additional staff. Public defender and the prosecutors are looking at, where's their place. And deflection just won't happen in the street. The uniqueness of this model is we can actually get deflection will happen in the street, but diversion will go. So at any point through the system, if one of the players, like one of the Delphia staff, see that someone may be eligible for diversion, they can make that recommendation. So that's coming this fall. I think I mentioned earlier, we're in the process now of building the alternative, what we call a continuum of community responders. So is there a space and opportunity for a response to emergency call that's not the police? Then who should that be? And I just want to point, this is where structural investment comes. So in Washtenaw County right now, you may want an alternative to the police, but there's no investment where there's actually anybody that can do it beyond business hours. So do you just want alternatives 9 to 5, Monday through Friday? Or do you want alternatives 24/7, 7 days a week, which requires additional investment? And the last thing I'll end with is this is just in the discussion phase of community responders. So do we do a pilot where in nonviolent, low level, maybe nuisance or community issues, is it the community, trained community members that respond? So that's all, we only have that on the drawing board, right? Just really talking about it. But those are the things that I'm excited about. The thing that I'm frustrated about is, we demonstrated in COVID, I'm going to jump on this soapbox, where we reduced the jail population in half. The jail population was under 150 for a facility that holds 400. Also, let me say that about a facility that holds 400. We're a county of 360,000 with a jail of 400 beds, which is substantially lower than most counties our size, which is the way it should be. But through COVID, we proved you could reduce the jail population in half and not see a significant spike in the kinds of crimes that you would anticipate. Now, I'm going to put the gun violence crimes aside. We've seen a rise in gun violence, but those aren't the same actors that were released as part of COVID. So I don't want that to get confused because people will try to do that to undermine what is trying to be accomplished here. But now, as we started to come out of COVID and activity started to come up, we started to see an increase in population. So that is my concern. You know, can we eventually come out of post-COVID with the recognition that many of the people that are in jail do not pose a threat and should not be in jail, that there are alternatives to them being in the system without being in jail?
Mhm.
I think what I have seen is more often than not in the past, the folks that we represent are invisible, right? They go through a system, people don't see how the system impacts them, how poverty impacts them. I think there's been a real turning of the corner of more and more people in the system and outside the system, citizens and institutional actors who are seeing our clients, seeing them that they're more than what they may have been accused of doing, and really wanting to make sure that their lives are different and they get services and that they're treated as full citizens. So that's what I see.
And I would say when we talked about expectations, right? So there's expectations around specific outcomes. There are also expectations, just like a general expectation, not how does any one thing happen, but that people are treated like people and that their needs are addressed and that they are given the support that they need to be their best fully functioning, or to be as fully functioning as possible, to be their best selves possible. And I think, you know, I don't think that our system, well, I don't think I have to say, I don't think our system wasn't designed to do that. It was designed to punish people and to put them away for a certain amount of time. It was kind of an arbitrary amount of time. And it's not meant to, it hadn't been meant to rehabilitate people in the way that people really deserve to be. And I hesitate even to use the word rehabilitate. They deserve to have their needs met. And if the criminal justice system is where those needs need to be met, well, then that's what we need to do. And so I don't think that came out as articulately as I had hoped, but I do hope that the general sentiment of meeting people where they are and getting them the services that they need when they need them, I hope that one comes through.
Great. We have more questions in minutes. So I want to get to one real quick one that kind of touches on, I think it touches on what you just said, Sue, and that this is a question that came in earlier. It's a question and a statement. There's a fiscal incentive to sentence criminals to more than 1 year of incarceration, so the state will pay. Is that correct? And the question is how to remedy that. So there's a fiscal incentive to sentence people to more than 1 year of incarceration to receive state funds. Is that correct?
I mean, if they're sentenced to more than 1 year in jail, I mean, more than 1 year, in many circumstances, they end up going to the state prison. There's no payment back to the county for folks that end up in a county jail. So maybe what they meant by that is the larger sentence, people end up in the state system. The county doesn't have to hold them for 1 year. Maybe that's what they mean. Delphia, am I missing something?
No, I'm not aware of any, state, county incentive by, sending folks to sentencing some more than 1 year. So
okay. I mean, it sort of makes it kind of sense if after they go to state prisons but then you'd have to want them in prison for more than 1 year or even up to 1 year. So, okay. So that's,
and there's also, there's been a lot of talk about guidelines and, there's also kind of norms that have, whether, one could argue they're good or if they're bad, norms of sentencing particular crimes or, and the majority of them here in Washtenaw County don't dictate that people go into prison, but a day incarcerated at all is very damaging to not only the individual, but that individual's family. But
Right.
that needs to be said.
So I'm gonna, that leads me into one last point that I'm gonna pick up, and that's on question about incarcerated women, and particular concerns and efforts around incarcerated women as a special class. What do you guys have to say about that?
I guess I was looking for more of a question, I guess.
I know, sorry. Let me see if I don't think it was really formed as a question. It was, I can find it.
Well, I must say that there's only one, if we're talking about folks who are incarcerated, who go to the Michigan Department of Corrections, women who do, there's only one institution that houses women in the state, and that is overcrowded, which causes a lot of issues and additional charges. Often people are in pretty sad living conditions. That I think that's another larger issue that's beyond what we can do at the county. But as citizens, we certainly can urge our legislators to do better, right, for women.
Okay. Does the fact that there's only one overcrowded prison for women in the state affect your the CJCC's thinking about and attention to diversion for women offenders, other mental health issues for women offenders? I mean, does that provide extra motivation for you to ameliorate the experience of women offenders? And if so, how?
I'll be honest, the fact that it's one prison and it's overcrowded hasn't factored in the fact that we know women that find themselves in the system have a different set of challenges that we need to be cognizant of, that we need to have a programmatic approach to, and even from a deflection standpoint, that all people aren't equal. The genders come with different set of responsibilities, different things that are going on, and we need to be cognizant of that. And many of our service providers, like community mental health, is aware of that. So as we think about our deflection diversion protocols, we must make sure that we're aware of the different challenges that come with that females have to face different than males. Oh, and the other part of it is youth. We haven't talked anything about youth.
That was another question. Thank you.
But that's something, Delphia may be able to speak to, or the commissioner. But there's an effort now. There's a lot of attention that's being focused in Washtenaw County around diversion, deflection of youth, investment on the front end. Delphia, do you want to speak to it? You probably speak to it better than I can.
Well, one of the things, like on the state level, on the state level, there's a lot of talk from DHS. One of the things that is unique, let me just start out. One of the things that's unique about our office is that we have a juvenile division that not only handles delinquency cases, but we handle child welfare or abuse and neglect cases. And that's very unusual. I think there's one other smaller public defender in the state that handles those type of cases. And so there is a movement from the state and from DHS to start a system, much like they do on the adult side, for funding, to start a system to fund that. But until then, we are, the county funds all of our separately funds all of our defense efforts. The Board of Commissioners funds all of that for all the children in Washtenaw County. So there's a lot of movement locally. I think I believe the the youth center, oh geez, the youth center, sorry about that. The youth center is starting a day treatment center, which is, I think it will, instead of focusing on placing them in juvenile detention, placing the young people in a day treatment center so they can get their services, get their, education, get counseling during the day, as opposed to being housed and incarcerated overnight. There's a lot of, I know the juvenile division at the circuit court, they're doing a lot of innovative things for kids who are already involved in the juvenile system to get them reconnected, to get them treatment, get reconnected with their families. There's the juvenile drug court. So there's a lot of things that are moving in that direction to kind of address the needs of young people, to prevent them from entering, starting that path down the pipeline to incarceration, in the adult system.
It's so complex because the neglected children are neglected by parents who themselves are obviously struggling and have suffered all kinds of problems themselves. And so the whole situation is just heartbreaking. And I have to,
It's very complex.
It's so complex and so heartbreaking. And I am so thankful to know you people, all of you, and to live somewhere where all of our professionals in the criminal legal system are working so hard for all of us. And so thank you so much. I need to call it now. We're out of time.
Oh, man.
So thank you so very much. I need to close out and just say that this was our final of 3 programs in Brews and Views on the criminal legal system. Prior to you 3, we had Belinda Doolin and Victoria Burton Harris talking about restorative justice, and then Desiree Simmons and Reverend Joseph Summers talking about the Crew report last month. So really very, very informative to have then you 3 telling us about the Criminal Justice Collaborative Council. So thank you so very much for your work and for spending your time with us.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. We'll get as much
Thank you.
information out about this as far as we can as possible. So for the final quarter of this year, in October, November, December, the program committees decided to commit Brews and Views and Lunch and Learn to an exploration of climate and environmental justice. On Wednesday, October 13th, we will be exploring carbon pricing and alternatives with Mary Garton of the Ann Arbor chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and Missy Stultz of A20. And on Friday, October 22nd, Lunch and Learn host Shelley Chanfield will explore issues regarding solar installations on agricultural land with MSU Extension educator M. Charles Gould. We hope you'll join us for both of these informative meetings. You know where to find your details and email on our website, which is still lwbannarbor.org. I mean, if you type that in, it'll get you to the Washtenaw County site or the Facebook page, same thing, facebook.com LWVAAA. To register, you go to the website and click on the calendar. We look forward to seeing you there. And again, thank you 3 so much for your work and for spending your time with us. So important.
Thank you.
Take
Hope
care,
you have a good
everyone.
night.
Farewell. Thank you.